Sabrina 70s comic, issue 62. The story starts out with Sabrina telling Hilda that Harvey has something to show them, and she relatably hopes to bus tickets to nowhere. He says he's a sleight of hand artist. He asks her to pick a card and put it back in the deck, and he shuffles it and gives her the card. She calls him marvelous and asks how he does it, even though it's so obvious that he'd do it by having all the cards be the same type of card. What's the point of showing us a magic trick we've already seen in the comic before? Well, I'm glad Harvey didn't screw up this one, but oh, never mind. Hilda says that he blew the trick, and Sabrina changed it to the right card, because she doesn't want him to get upset, even though he needs the feedback to improve. They're so close to Harvey. How would he not hear them speaking at full volume? He gets laughed at for messing up the card trick, and is told that they can see the card hidden in his sleeve, and he's called a dummy. At least this comic is self-aware of the fact that the idiots are idiots. They're called that. Sabrina had the foresight to spy on him and see that her fear came true, so she casts a spell to make the right card float up. He's scared and moves on to a different trick. Then after he taps the deck 3 times, it starts raining cards that are all the same type. Realistically, this freaks Harvey out, and Sabrina should know that, but she probably thinks it's worth keeping him from being embarrassed. He does the same trick again, but Sabrina turns every card into the ace of spades instead of making it rain this time. So he quits because he thinks he got so good that he's scared himself. I wonder if this will last. Or if it won't, because I guess his memory got erased. We shouldn't have to guess this. In the next story, Sabrina says his model airplane is beautiful, and he wants to have a fly-off with a jerk who says his remote plane is better. Is it? After Harvey shows confidence, predictably, he's insulted anyways. Despite his plane being insulted, the jerk still is smart enough to make sure there's no illegal boosters on it. And Harvey's smart enough to check his over. The jerk puts a wad of gum in a specific spot so it would fall down, wanting to make sure he'd get humiliated rather than just having faith in his plane to be so much better. I wish he explained it was because Harvey's an idiot in Casanova, and that's why he hates him. Because someone hating Harvey isn't evil right from the start. Harvey's nice enough to admit that the jerk's plane isn't bad, and Sabrina's nice enough to admit that it's fascinating seeing its loop. I like that she didn't ruin his plane right away with magic. Harvey's plane can't be controlled and falls into the bushes. He realistically finds the gum, which apparently explains why the flaps wouldn't work. And the jerk says Harvey should be careful where he puts his gum. Harvey relatably says he doesn't chew gum and calls him a rat, and Sabrina says she'd like to see both planes fly together. The plane gets airborne again, and she casts a spell so that Harvey's plane dives into his and shoots at it. Machine guns? Rockets? Your plane is armed? Those lines were amusingly silly. It's making Harvey look bad, but Sabrina just wants revenge. Harvey thinks that the ghost of a red baron is haunting his plane, instead of putting 2 and 2 together after all the times weird good things happen to him whenever he's around Sabrina, while bad things happen to his enemies. The plane comes after the jerk, and the story ends there. In the next story, Sabrina looks forward to a peaceful and quiet day at the beach to read a big book. Since when are beaches quiet and peaceful under normal circumstances? She could have read the book somewhere else. Was someone vacuuming in her house? Someone puts a radio program on behind her. She tells them to turn it down a bit and they insult her. She asks them to turn it off while they're gone for a swim anyways, and they say no, and make a dumb excuse instead of leaving it at that. Worst of all, couldn't they just go somewhere else? Couldn't Sabrina make them do that right away? I was impressed at her restraint for not immediately shutting off the music and breaking the radio with her magic, or at the very least, like was immediately obvious, just using magic to make them polite to her. She casts a spell out loud, saying that's totally a beach ball. And one of the jerks gets brainwashed into throwing a radio like a ball and sending it into the water. Too much time is wasted with them being insulted for it instead of them hitting each other. Sabrina gets given the idea to summon a custard pie and make him send a pie into his face. And he says he thought the pie was a ball. And I smile and try not to giggle at just seeing this. The pie was a ball? You're nuts! They start to fight, and I hate that their fight is completely covered by a dust cloud out of nowhere. This comic's shown physical impact with fights before, even against Hilda. And the story ends with Sabrina thinking peace is wonderful, when this isn't peace at all. it'd be just as loud. I guess she's so used to hearing and thinking about what she's hearing that she couldn't imagine being deaf and make herself that way. And she might have gotten hurt by a beach ball she couldn't hear a warning about if she did deafen herself. Even with a potion. That could have been explained in a thought bubble. She could have just magically drained the radio's battery. The whole story started out with an idiot ball because there was no reason she couldn't have read the book somewhere other than the beach. In the next story, a doctor tells Sabrina that Hilda's problems are mostly imaginary, all in her mind. And he says he's sending over a psychiatrist friend of his. Is he a real doctor that she stupidly told about her witch problems? She warns him that he's making a mistake, and then she tells Hilda in a car that she's a little disturbed. Well, she is. She's not as bad as she could be, especially recently, but she is a jerk. Hilda confuses me by saying, "What kind of doctor makes house calls?" Doctors have made house calls in this comic before. Hilda's rude to the shrink. She tells him no shots, which makes sense since it's been established she hates needles, and she got a surprise needle against her will by a doctor earlier. And since the last doctor who came to her on a house call did that to her, of course she'd insult house calls. But it's still surprising that she dismisses the idea for all doctors. He says that he works through the subconscious mind using relaxing hypnosis. He wants to see how difficult she is first, and tells her that her eyes are very sleepy and she'll obey every command. She's told to embarrass herself acting like a monkey. Actually, she's told she is one, which helps justify her turning into one better. But not by much. She's in the mortal world. Maybe she instinctively assumed he was a witch and knew she was one, which would make sense if she was sent to a psychiatrist because she said she was a witch. He runs away, and she says that he did help her, because all she needed was a good laugh to feel better. The story ends with a psychiatrist wanting a psychiatrist. It's a shame that we don't know why she was sent to one, because it could have had the comic call her out on her own problems. The first story, by Frank Doyle, is about Harvey messing up his card trick in front of some guys and getting made fun of for it after Sabrina was smart enough to spy on him to see if he'd screw up. So she uses magic to make him look good in front of his friends. And that just freaks Harvey out and makes him quit magic tricks. Harvey doing magic tricks is a cliche of the comic at this point. I wonder if he was doing magic tricks because he subconsciously remembers that magical things happen around him a lot, so he's more fascinated with magic. He even had magic at one point. In the second story, by the same writer, Harvey has a model plane competition with a jerk. And after the jerk tries to cheat by putting gum on his plane, Sabrina gets revenge with her magic, amusingly making the plane destroy his with machine guns and chase him. Then there's a story where some jerks at the beach play their music loud in front of Sabrina because she stupidly went here to read a book, and she doesn't ever consider telling them to go somewhere else and still play it. So she gets back at them with magic for telling her to bury her head in the sand and lying to her. Too bad the story didn't show them actually fighting. They barely get punished at all. It was funny at one point though, but the comic's only a third as funny as it should be at best. But it got funnier in the late issues for sure. I should be giggling at it once an issue. In the final story, Hilda's sent to a psychiatrist for sadly no explained reason, and she never gets the help she needs because she stupidly doesn't resist turning into a monkey. I figured she'd be more likely to use her powers on him for insulting her. Why were the rest of her family members allowed to be in the same room as her? It wasn't family therapy, was it? It's a shame this happened because she probably needs help.